They buried me with the wrong name on the tombstone and the right enemies crying over it. Isabel wore black lace like grief was fashionable. She looked stunning, of course. She always did, even when she was lying, especially when she was lying. And Lawrence, that smug bastard, stood beside her like a perfectly sculpted pillar of support. Not many people could stand at a funeral with that much pride in their posture. But then again, not many people watched millions fall into their laps. By pretending to love someone in a coma, the pastor spoke of loyalty, of love, of legacy, and all I could think about was the sound of Lawrence's voice the day before the crash. "It's almost done, Izzy. After the papers go through, we split everything. And Kevin, he'll never know what hit him." They thought. I didn't hear them. They thought I was unconscious. They thought I was dying. They were wrong on all three. The first time I opened my eyes after the crash, I couldn't move, couldn't speak, but I could feel, and I remembered. Every whisper, every forged signature, every lie Isabel whispered into my ear while holding my cold hand for the cameras. They planned everything, right down to the prenup I signed in good faith trusting her, right down to the silent inheritance clause buried in legal language they never bothered to read. Because why would they? I was supposed to be dead. The deal was sealed. Isabel would get the properties. Lawrence would get the company shares. And I would get a eulogy. But death, as it turns out, is negotiable. I came back with no announcement, no press release, no warning, just silence, watching, waiting. And when the time came, I let them sign the divorce papers with their own perfect smiles, thinking they'd won. They didn't even flinch when they saw the clause on page 7. They didn't read it, and I didn't stop them, because revenge isn't loud. It's patient, it's quiet, and it's written in fine print. I wasn't always this calculated. There was a time when I believed love was simple. You find someone, you fall, you commit, you protect them, even from yourself if needed. That was me before Isabel, before I knew what it felt like to be loved for your last name instead of your first, for your future instead of your flaws. She came into my life like a summer storm, warm, sudden, impossible to ignore. I met her at a charity auction. I didn't even want to attend. She was there with a glass of champagne and a laugh that didn't match the crowd. Everyone else wore their ambition like perfume, thick and suffocating. But Isabel, she wore mystery. She looked at me like she didn't already know who I was. And I was naive enough to believe that was real. I was Kevin Caldwell, sole heir to the Caldwell Trust. Old money, yes. But I wasn't a trust fund klitsch. I built things. I coded. I created. I wanted more than a last name. I wanted purpose. And Isabel? She made me feel like I wasn't just someone's son. Like I was someone. She used to say my heart was the only thing about me that wasn't born rich. That I had depth, kindness, that she felt safe with me. She used to say a lot of things. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. Nothing fancy, no fireworks, just a quiet rooftop at dawn, her favorite time of day. She cried, said yes, wrapped her arms around me like she was choosing me. And I believed her. God, I believed her. We got married 6 months later. Simple ceremony. No press. Just people who mattered. Or so I thought. Lawrence was my best man. He stood beside me, smiled in photos, toasted with tears in his eyes. We'd been friends since prep school. He knew everything about me, every weakness, every fear, every pressure I carried from a father who built an empire and died before teaching me how to hold it together. Lawrence stepped in, helped with the company, advised on expansions, kept the board in line. He was sharp, strategic, and I thought, loyal. Looking back, it was all so precise. The way Isabel encouraged me to delegate, to trust Lawrence with more control. You can't do everything, Kevin, she'd say, stroking my hand. Let him help you. He wants what's best for you. She said it with the kind of voice that made betrayal sound like a blessing, and I listened. Z started staying late at work, taking on new ventures, believing she was proud of me, that we were building a future together. Meanwhile, she was building something else entirely herself in secret, positioning, aligning, smiling, and all. The while I missed the signs, the late night texts. She'd laugh off. Kristen's going through a breakup, she'd say. I'm just keeping her company. The locked phone. You wouldn't understand. It's girl stuff. The way she started pulling away when I talked about kids, about the house we wanted, about anything that didn't come with status. But love is a strange thing. When you're in it, logic doesn't matter. Doubt becomes a test of loyalty. I wasn't just blind, I was willfully blind. It wasn't until the accident that everything cracked open. I still don't know exactly how it happened. One minute I was driving home from a late meeting. The next, I was skidding off the side of a cliff. The police said the weather, the brakes. But I remember the last maintenance report I approved. I remember Lawrence telling me not to worry about it, he'd handle it. I remember Isabel crying at the hospital, telling the doctors to do everything while her signature was already on the insurance updates. And then, silence. For weeks I was in a coma. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, but I could hear every visitor, every whisper, every calculated move they made while thinking I couldn't see them. Lawrence signing executive orders on my behalf, Isabel discussing property divisions with her lawyer 2 weeks in, Kristen whispering, "Does he even still count as your husband if he's not conscious?" And Isabel laughing. It wasn't loud, just a soft, amused breath, but it shattered everything. They thought I was dying, maybe even already dead inside, but I wasn't. I was waking up, slowly, quietly, furious. By the time I opened my eyes, the divorce papers had already been drafted. And wouldn't you know, they had my signature, dated, filed. The ink looked so fresh, but they missed something. Something crucial, the inheritance clause written by my father's old lawyer, buried in a section they never cared to read. One that invalidated any transfer of assets if the divorce was finalized under duress, fraud, or incapacitation. One that returned everything to me, if even one clause was triggered. And let's just say, all three applied. So I smiled. I played along. I let them file. I let them sign. I let them walk straight into their own ruin. Because I wasn't going to fight them in court. I was going to end them in silence, and they would never even see it coming. Okay, so the first time I saw Isabel after waking up, she didn't recognize me. Not really. I don't mean physically, my face hadn't changed, but something else had. I wasn't the man she married anymore. I wasn't the Kevin who brought her tea when she had a headache, who left meetings to walk her dog, who gave her the passwords to everything because love meant trust. I was quieter, still, and she felt it. Even before I opened my mouth, she flinched. "Kevin," she said, her voice soft, her tone rehearsed. "You're awake," as if that ruined everything. I nodded, didn't smile, didn't ask where she'd been the last 2 weeks, didn't mention that I'd overheard every whispered plan through the walls of my hospital room. I just looked at her, let her drown in her own silence. And she did. She started fidgeting with her bracelet, gold, custom. Something I'd given her on our 2nd anniversary. It was engraved, "For everything we'll build together." She must have forgotten, or maybe she never read it. She sat at the edge of the hospital bed like she didn't know whether to kiss me or confess. "I've been here every day," she lied. "I've barely slept." I almost laughed. I'd heard her leave early for yoga, make dinner reservations, coordinate meetings with Lawrence about logistics. She didn't even change her perfume. Still wore the one I bought her from Paris. Still weaponized memories like they were currency. I nodded again. "Where's Lawrence?" That caught her off guard. He's out." "I don't know. Work?" She smiled tightly. "You'll need rest. We can talk later." "I'm sure we will." She left quickly. Like guilt had a curfew. That night, I asked the nurse for a copy of my medical records. Then I asked for the visitor logs. Then the date on the divorce draft. It was all there, all to clean. Filed 1 week into my coma, signed on my behalf. And apparently I'd even waived my rights to contest. But the signatures weren't mine. Not the way I wrote. Not the way I signed legal documents. I used a full signature, Kevin James Caldwell. Not just Kevin Caldwell scrawled with a cheap ballpoint. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was forged, fraudulent, calculated. And for a moment, I felt nothing. No rage, no heartbreak, just disappointment. A dull ache in the ribs where trust used to live. But it didn't stop there. When I got home, my home, the one I designed, the one I paid for down to the last screw, my key didn't work. The lock had been changed. I stood there on the front step, exhausted from the hospital, wearing a coat that didn't quite fit, watching as Isabel opened the door from the inside. With Lawrence right behind her. She froze. So did he. "Oh, Kevin," she said, blinking too fast. "I didn't think, you should have called." "I live here," I said flatly. "Well," Lawrence stepped forward, his voice cool, patronizing. "We weren't sure when you'd be back." I asked. His jaw tensed. but he smiled. We're just helping get things in order. With the estate, the board, the transition. You mean my company? There was a pause, a subtle one, but enough. They thought I was still weak, still healing, still too confused to know what they'd done, and I let them think that. For now, I didn't ask why there were two wine glasses on the counter, or why her jacket was on his chair, or why my name had been taken off the front mailbox and replaced with the Grams, her maiden name. I didn't say a word about the second toothbrush in my master bathroom, or the men's cufflinks beside her jewelry box. Instead, I looked at her. Really looked. She was beautiful, polished, picture perfect, and suddenly I couldn't remember what I ever loved about her. Maybe it was the way she made me feel needed, or maybe it was the illusion of warmth she sold so well. But standing there now, I realized I didn't love her. I loved who I was when I didn't know better. I didn't say anything. I just turned and left. And that silence, that was the start of their undoing. Because Isabel didn't know I'd already spoken to my father's old lawyer. She didn't know. The will was updated before his death with a contingency clause. She didn't know that clause required her to remain married at the time of inheritance, and she definitely didn't know that the moment the divorce went through, all assets would legally revert to the next named trustee, me, not Lawrence, not her, me. They forged the divorce to steal an empire, but they signed the one document that would give it all back. I just had to let them, and that was the hardest part, waiting, watching, pretending to heal while they dismantled the life they thought they'd stolen. Every smile Isabel gave him was another nail in their coffin. Every meeting they held without me was another thread I unraveled behind closed doors. And every night I went home to the spare condo she didn't know I still owned. I plotted, not for revenge, for justice, for every honest part of me they broke just to feed their ambition. And when the moment came, I would be ready, because I wasn't fighting to win back what was mine. I was fighting to make sure they'd never steal from anyone again. Okay, so the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was pretending I didn't know. Every time Isabel smiled at me with that polished, professional pity, I had to stop myself from flinching. Every time Lawrence spoke to me in that slow, careful tone like I'd lost half my brain instead of just my patience, I had to hold back a laugh. I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter, but I was boiling, and no one knew. On paper, I was recovering, slowly reintegrating, catching up on my affairs, attending therapy, relearning the life they tried to erase. But in truth, every day felt like a performance. Every breath was another line in a script I didn't audition for. I woke up each morning wondering what else they'd taken. I'd open emails I hadn't written, review meetings I never scheduled, hear stories about decisions I supposedly made. During the weeks I was in a coma, they'd filled in my absence like it was convenient, like I was a name to be borrowed until they could make it theirs. And through it all, I had to stay quiet, because if I reacted too soon, I'd lose everything. The clause in my father's trust was specific. I had to remain passive. No challenges, no legal intervention, not until the divorce was finalized and notarized. Any emotional outburst, any proof that I was aware of what they were doing would trigger a reevaluation. And a reevaluation meant lawyers. And lawyers meant delays. So I played dumb, smiled politely in rooms where I used to lead, nodded along when Lawrence presented projections that used my code, my team, my legacy. I shook hands with board members who looked through me now, as if absence had made me irrelevant. But beneath the surface, my mind never stopped moving. Every night, I stood in front of the mirror and asked myself the same question. Was I really going to let them get away with this? The silence in return was always deafening, because a part of me, an old, fragile part, still wanted to believe in something. In the version of Isabel that used to bring me coffee when I was working late. In the Lawrence who once jumped in front of a press photographer to protect my privacy. In the family dinners, the shared inside jokes, the memories I used to frame in gold. But memory is just a softer word for denial. And love, when poisoned, becomes something colder than hate. I didn't want revenge. I wanted relief. Relief from waking up every day and not recognizing the life I was supposedly grateful for. Relief from smiling at people who secretly hoped I'd stayed in that hospital bed. Relief from pretending that grief and anger weren't wrestling inside my chest every time I walked into a room with them in it. I missed the version of me that trusted, that laughed without watching for signs, that believed a promise meant something, even when no one was looking. But that Kevin was dead, burned in the wreckage of a crash no one ever really investigated. I spent my days rehearsing lines in my head, things I wanted to say to Isabel. 2. Ask her if she ever loved me, if there was even one moment where it was real, or if the entire thing had always been an audition, an act, a transaction and a diamond ring and a last name. And Lawrence, I wanted to ask him how it felt to steal from someone who would have given you everything, to betray someone who once called you a brother, to build his castle on the bones of my trust. But I never asked, because I already knew the answer, and it was silence. I kept records, screenshots, audio files, security footage, every forged document, every backdated signature, every time stamped video of Isabel entering the building after midnight while Lawrence signed off on board revisions. My father's lawyer, his real lawyer, met with me privately every Thursday. We laid it out piece by piece. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to bury them. But the wait was agony. Suspense has a sound. It's not loud. It's not sharp. It's slow, crawling, like the whisper of a lock turning when you're not sure who's on the other side. Some nights, I sat in the dark with a glass of scotch and stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd break before they did. Because when you pretend long enough, the mask starts to harden. It stops coming off. You start to forget which expressions are yours and which ones are rehearsed. You start to lose track of the moment when pain turned into power, and whether you'll ever be able to tell the difference again. I used to think justice felt like fire, but now I know it feels like waiting with your hands still, your mouth shut, your jaw tight enough to break teeth, waiting while the people who gutted you laugh over champagne you paid for, waiting while your name gets dragged through a story they rewrote without your consent. But the day was coming, the day the ink dried, the documents filed, the signatures authenticated, the moment when all their greed would turn in on itself like a dying star. And when that day came, I wouldn't shout, I'd smile, and I'd watch them unravel, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I needed to finally breathe. Okay, so the plan was airtight until Kristen showed up. I hadn't seen her in years. Not since college. Not since the night Isabel made sure we'd never speak again. She was the friend who knew me before I was someone, before the Caldwell name meant money, before boardrooms and contracts and prenups were a part of my vocabulary. She was the girl who made me laugh when my father died, who held my hand after my mother's funeral when no one else could look me in the eye, and apparently, she'd been in the background all along. I saw her at a charity gala one I wasn't supposed to attend, but Lawrence's assistant had sent an invite to the wrong inbox, and curiosity got the better of me. I went, alone, in the black suit they thought I'd buried, and there she was, Kristen, standing by the wine bar, staring right at me like she'd been waiting. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just walked over and said the 5 words that changed everything. They're selling your company, Kevin. My blood went cold. What are you talking about? They're not just managing it. They're liquidating, slowly, quietly. Isabel and Lawrence, they've already taken offers. And if you wait for the divorce to finalize, you won't have anything left to fight over. I stared at her. The words didn't register right away. That's not possible. They can't sell controlling shares without your sign off. She finished for me. Yeah, about that. She handed me a file. Slim, crisp, my signature again, dated 3 weeks prior, right under a line that authorized the private sale of several shell divisions of Caldwell Technologies. It's not just forgery anymore, she said softly. It's dismantling, piece by piece. Kristen worked in acquisitions. Isabel had conveniently pushed her out of my life years ago, painting her as clingy, overprotective, jealous. And like the fool I was, I believed her. Now I saw the real reason. Kristen had a brain and a heart. Both were threats. I took the file home and laid it beside the others, each one more damning than the last. But this one forced my hand. I couldn't wait for the divorce to finalize anymore. If they sold off the company, the inheritance clause wouldn't matter. There would be nothing left to reclaim. They weren't just stealing my legacy, they were trying to erase it. And so, I pivoted. No more slow burn. No more quiet. I needed leverage. Now, that night, I called Kristen again. We met in private. No lawyers, no strategies, just 2 people who used to trust each other, trying to remember what that felt like. Why are you helping me? I asked. Her answer was simple. Because I know what it feels like to love someone who doesn't see the knife until it's already in their back. The words hit me harder than I expected. She gave me names, banks, accounts, quiet offshore transactions tied to Isabel's maiden name, shared by Lawrence. Properties hidden under trusts they assumed no one would ever trace. Kristen had everything. She handed me the final key, and for the first time since I'd woken up, I felt fear shift into something sharper. Focus. They thought they were ahead, but they were messy, greedy, arrogant, and they'd made one critical mistake. They forgot who built the thing they were trying to destroy. Me, Kevin Caldwell, and I was still very much alive. Okay, so the moment didn't come with fireworks. It came with a pen, a conference room, and the slow, dawning horror in Isabel's eyes as she realized she'd just signed her own downfall. We were in the boardroom of Caldwell Technologies, the same one where my father had once announced his retirement. The same one where Lawrence had stood 6 months ago and delivered his first quarterly update in my absence, flanked by Isabel, like she was already the new queen of the castle. Now it was just the three of us. No lawyers, no assistants, just us, and the papers in front of them. They thought it was a final transfer, another step in their long, careful dismantling of what I'd built. A handoff of remaining non-contested assets. A token, really. They thought I was giving up, letting go. I told them the same thing I'd told the assistant outside. I just want closure. Isabel signed first, elegant as ever. She didn't read it. Neither did Lawrence. They trusted the version I wanted them to see, exhausted, defeated, looking to disappear. She pushed the folder toward me with a smile that could kill stars. I hope this helps, Kevin, she said softly. It will. I picked up the pen. I didn't sign. Instead, I slid the folder back toward them and took out another document. Not from my briefcase, from Kristen's. She stepped into the room a beat later, heels silent, expression neutral. Lawrence blinked, visibly thrown. Kristen, he asked. She nodded. Hi, Lawrence. You look thinner. Isabel's eyes narrowed. What is this? I opened the file. These are bank records. From Zurich, from Geneva, from Singapore, all traced back to 2 shell companies. Both registered under your maiden name, Isabel. Both linked directly to transfers made from the Caldwell Foundation's discretionary fund. She went pale. Lawrence stood up. Kevin, let's not. I cut him off. There's more. Property purchases in Marbella. A private account used to funnel money through dummy tech purchases. And you used my signature to authorize every one of them. Isabel opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Forgery, fraud, wire transfers through non-disclosed entities, tax evasion. And here's the best part, diverting funds from a registered trust meant to benefit underprivileged tech students. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from my father's legacy. Lawrence swallowed. You don't have proof. Kristen handed me a USB drive. I placed it on the table. This is every signed document, every access log, every time-stamped IP address. You forged everything under an account that still used your old password. The same one you used in college. Isabel's voice cracked. Kevin, we can talk about this. No, I said, standing slowly. You talked, for months, behind my back, in my house, over my body. Her mouth opened again, shut, then opened once more. I loved you, she said it, like a defense. I almost believed her, but then I remembered the locked bathroom door, the wine glass on Lawrence's side of the bed, the second toothbrush, the smell of his cologne on the scarf I bought her in Italy. Then why did you kill me? She flinched, and that was when I knew. She didn't regret what she did. She regretted getting caught. Lawrence stepped forward. Okay, listen, we can fix this. We'll return the money. No one needs to know. Too late. I nodded at the security camera blinking in the corner. This room's been live for the past 30 minutes. It's already with the board, with the feds, with every person you ever lied to. Lawrence's mouth dropped open. I played dumb, I said, stepping closer. I let you think I was weak. Let you sell off pieces of my company. Let you smile in my face while cutting off my name from the legacy I built. I let you dig the grave. Kristen stepped forward beside me. And now you're standing in it. Isabel stood up too fast, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't understand. You were gone. We didn't know if you were ever coming back. We had to act. No, I said. You chose to act. You chose to rewrite the will before the ink dried on my pulse. You chose to treat my silence like consent. Her face twisted, trying to form a new strategy behind her eyes. A new narrative. But it was too late. I'd already seen the truth. I'd lived inside their lie. And now, they'd lost the script. The board members entered the room minutes later, escorted by internal security. No yelling, no drama, just quiet, precise, official Isabel was escorted out first, still beautiful, still poised, but her eyes empty, like the wind had finally reached the hollow core. Lawrence followed, wrists loose, smile gone. His confidence? Gone too. And me? I stood at the window, watching the rain hit the glass. The world looked different now. Not brighter, not softer, but real. No illusions, no lies, no polished glass over poisoned water, just the truth. Kristen stayed behind, hands in her coat pockets, watching me carefully. You okay? She asked. No, I turned toward her. But I will be. She smiled. Not the kind of smile you give to win something. The kind you give when you survive something. And maybe, just maybe, she was the only one who ever saw me clearly. I looked at the folder again, the one Isabel signed. It wasn't a handoff. It was a confession. A trap with their fingerprints on every page. And the prenup? That ironclad monstrosity they'd weaponized. It was now Exhibit A in a criminal investigation, because fraud voids everything, every clause, every asset, every lie, everything they touched now unraveled in reverse. And me? I was no longer the man in the coma. I was the one pulling the plug, not for vengeance, not for show, but because some stories only begin after you destroy the ending they tried to write for you. Okay, so revenge wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't fire. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't some cinematic explosion where I walked away with flames behind me. It was colder, sharper. It was a stillness that settled over my chest the moment Isabel's frozen accounts lit up the news cycle. The second Lawrence's face hit the front page under corporate conspiracy and fraud, power couple's downfall. The minute the federal subpoena reached their doorstep, and every lawyer they tried to call refused to answer, that was justice. And it was personal. Because I didn't just take back what was mine. I made sure they'd never take from anyone again. Their names were blacklisted across every boardroom in New York, every investment firm, every tech partner I'd ever once introduced them to. They weren't just broke, they were untouchable, radioactive, corporate poison. Isabel moved out of state, quietly, alone. No one threw her goodbye party. No one followed her. And Lawrence? He tried to save face, filed appeals, leaked interviews, but the public didn't care about his excuses. They cared about the receipts, and I had all of them. I made sure they were buried not with screaming, but with silence. Legal, surgical, final. They left me for dead. So I made sure their reputations didn't survive me, and the company? It flourished. The moment their names were wiped from every document, every boardroom chair, every inch of the website, they began to forget they'd ever existed at all. I rebuilt from the ground up, quietly, thoughtfully, no flash, no headlines, just smart moves and better people, people like Kristen. She didn't ask for a role, didn't expect a seat at the table, but I gave her one anyway, because she'd earned it. Every name she traced, every file she pulled, every late night she spent helping me stitch back the empire they tried to dismantle. She didn't do it for power, she did it for me, because she remembered who I was before I forgot myself, and that mattered. We didn't fall into some sudden love story. There were no dramatic kisses under stormy skies, just two people finally breathing in the same rhythm again, with time, with space, with the quiet understanding that the right kind of love doesn't rush and it waits for you to be whole. And me? I moved into a new place, not the old penthouse, not the sterile condo I used while plotting my return, a home, small, clean, with a garden Isabel never would have looked twice at. I planted things, real things, things that grew slow, because I was done rushing, I was done proving. The old Kevin, the one who needed to be admired, needed to be seen, needed to be good enough, he died in that coma. And the new me? He doesn't ask for permission, or forgiveness, because he earned his peace in silence. But sometimes, silence breaks, and sometimes it shows up on your doorstep wearing a wrinkled suit and carrying a broken apology. 1 year later, to the day Isabel came back, she looked thinner, tired. Her eyes didn't sparkle anymore. Her clothes didn't scream status. Her perfume? Faint, like the scent had started to forget her. She held a letter. I didn't invite her in. She handed it to me and said, I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I remember. I didn't open it. I didn't need to, because whatever version of herself she'd written in that letter, she wasn't writing it for me. She was writing it for the version of me she destroyed, and that man doesn't live here anymore. So I said nothing, not out of anger, but because she didn't deserve the sound of my voice. She left quietly, and I stood there, not shaken, not sad, just steady. Because closure isn't something you get from the person who hurt you, it's something you take back piece by piece until the mirror finally shows you again. And me? I saw myself now, not just a name on a building, not just a man with a trust fund or a file full of legal victories, but a man who was used, left, erased, and still stood, better, sharper, freer. I thought I wanted revenge, but what I really wanted was proof. Proof that I could walk away from everything they tried to take and still have more than they ever had. And the proof? It wasn't in court records or headlines or settlements. It was in waking up every day knowing they'd have to live with the memory of the man they betrayed while I live without them, completely, forever. Because ultimate revenge, it isn't making them bleed, it's making them irrelevant.